Hello.
Well, good evening. I should say good evening, but it's bad evening. And
But once again, Leeds have all the ball, loads of chances, and end up losing.
beware the lack of ideas of Marsh. He will have to go if they lose these next two games against those beautiful
Yeah, but
Lancashire Red Rose opponents.
how can they have so much of the ball and have so many chances and persistently lose matches? It isn't just tactics; it's something else up as well.
You play frantic football, and the way you snatch at your chances is all part of that as well. Too depressing
Oh
to
yeah.
even sort of contemplate it, Graham.
All
Unfortunately,
right.
which is why
Well, let's move on.
in life we be thankful that there are those things to make us smile much more. And well, interestingly, the first name that's come up here is Hamish Hawk, who
Good
so
name.
I don't have his album that came out
Oh
last
dear.
year. It was on my list to get the Heavy Elevator album, but I did think that the Mauritian badminton doubles champion 1973 was
Great
right
title.
up there in the top three singles of the year. I absolutely love that single. But you saw him, Graham, only recently.
Yeah. Well,
So give me the circumstances.
money, money, money,
Oh,
money. Well, that's his single that's on
that's
BBC Six Music on rotation right now.
yeah.
Off Angel Numbers, his new album's actually his fourth album, Charles.
So
And
Angel is
Heavy
Angel
Elevator
so
was
Angel
obviously
Numbers is out already.
well,
Gosh.
it's out digitally, but I think the
Ah,
old fashioned CD that I'm going to buy
yes.
isn't out for a couple of weeks yet. But anyway,
Ah,
that's actually his fourth album, his new album, and he's been going for more than 10 years. Born in Edinburgh, went to University of St Andrews, hung about the music scene in Fife, bumped into Kenny Anderson of King Creosote, who he
yeah.
now plays with on and off
Ah, right.
regularly.
Yeah.
And so he's been developing as a singer songwriter
Mm,
for quite a long time with a band, a very good band. And he's just slowly got better and better. So
mm.
he's gone from being completely unknown to suddenly just in the last year, there's a sort of buzz around him. So I went to the Brudenell Social Club, that brilliant venue in Leeds on Thursday, to see Hamish Hawk in person on stage
Did he play
at a
main
packed
stage,
venue,
Graham, or second stage?
main stage, but he has played the small stage before. And he
Yeah.
seems like a man who's exceedingly happy that finally, after like more than 10 years of work, he's actually getting somewhere. He's absolutely delighted to be in
Mm.
front of a decent audience. So he's lapping up. He's lapping up his new sort of semi fame, which was good to see. But if you
And the backing of
imagine,
Six
yeah,
Music. Six Music played the Mauritian single very heavily. And actually,
mm, mm.
subsequent to Money, there's a song that he's done as well called Rest and Veneers, which he's done with
Oh yeah,
Samantha
yeah, yeah,
Crane.
yeah,
Now,
yeah. That's
is
right.
that
Yeah,
off? Is that off the new album, or is that off
I think it
Samantha's
is
album?
actually. Yeah. Well, since I
Mm.
haven't got his new album because I refuse to stream
Because you
it,
refuse to get anything
I,
other than CDs. Yeah,
yeah. I can't say for certain, but I think that is on his new album. Yeah, and it's
yeah.
been very well reviewed by Louder Than War and
Mm. Mm.
Pitchfork and everything. Quite rightly
Mm.
so because he's like he's an amazing person and amazingly talented, and he's got so many different influences, but it ends up being entirely him, and he's a bit of a unique character. He's well worth seeing because he's very good on stage. He's a real charmer. He's a sort of bug-eyed, flamboyant, uh, subtly well-dressed charmer. And when I talked to him afterwards, I mean, this may not have been the wisest thing on my part, but I said, like, you remind me of a sort of young Morrissey.
That's
If a young
brave.
Morris had been the son of an eccentric Scottish laird who liked Lloyd
That's
Cole.
brave.
So I don't think he liked that because he is a really intelligent bloke, and he's. If you listen to his lyrics, there's more intelligence and more clever wordplay and use of language
There
in
is.
one Hamish Hawk song than in Ed Sheeran's entire back catalogue.
There is. Now you
So,
make also a comparison with Lawrence of Arabia, which might just because the blonde hair, I guess.
well, he's a bit like Peter Tool on Slave. He's got that sort of like
Mm.
slightly loose, debonair, quietly posh charm. And I thought of that afterwards. I thought I should have said for like Lawrence Arabia might like that better
Mm.
than the son of an eccentric Scottish laird because that implies poshness, doesn't it? Son of an eccentric
I
Scottish
would
laird.
make two other comparisons. I mean, you're quite right. You can make endless comparisons, but actually, you're right as well that he ends up being his own man. I think it's an obvious comparison to make with Neil Hannon of Divine
Mm.
Comedy, in particular
Yeah.
in relation to the Mauritian badminton doubles champion 1973, which has the songwriting craft of the very best of Neil Hannon's work. I also think you
Mm.
can, to a lesser extent, the use of words, you can throw someone like Jarvis Cocker into the equation as well. He even refers to Jarvis, of course, in that song, the
Oh, he
Mauritian
does,
song.
yeah. Yeah, but I think unlike Neil Hannon, who looks like he could and should be in cabaret,
Yes.
I think Hamish Hawk is more of a rock background. I mean, when he was a kid, when he was like 10 years old or 12 years old, the two albums that he got early on when he was only properly young were the White Stripes Elephant
Yeah.
and Up the Bracket for the Libertines. So although he's very erudite and very clever and all that sort of thing, but like and very witty, very witty and very charming, like Neil Hannon of Divine Comedy, he's
Mm.
generally rock, and his band are certainly a rock band, although with flexibility and versatility. They're not they're not a band that does anything straight, and he doesn't write straight songs. He combines lots of different attributes and lots of influences, and occasionally he sounds like Scott Walker, but only occasionally. And occasionally he sounds like Morrissey, but only occasionally. He is his own man.
Can you foresee, I mean, the momentum growing even more in terms of maybe even acquiring commercial success, or is he still more likely to be not necessarily a cult figure, but one that's appreciated by the Six Music clientele, and the magazine reading clientele that enjoy, as you say, louder
You mean
than
the
bolder
you
sort
mean
of.
the slightly older clientele? Because one thing I
Yes,
noticed at the
yes.
in Leeds on last Thursday was that although there were young people there and there were people of 20s and 30s, there was an awful lot of people of my age or in their 50s,
Mm,
which I'm not knocking, but it just showed that the BBC Six Music fraternity
mm.
probably leans towards the old end of the market, although I'm sure it's got all sorts of people listening to it, but in general. So I think the problem is that what he does, which is very good and getting better with every album, if he'd come along in the peak time for indie music in the 80s or even the 90s, I think he'd be medium level big. He would never
Mm.
be Madonna
No,
or Adele or anywhere near Ed Sheeran, but
no,
he'd be almost mainstream. He'd be well known, especially in the days of Top of the Pops, because he would have gone down really well on Top of the Pops because he's
he would, he
so good
would.
on stage.
Mm.
But now that those platforms don't exist, that there is no mainstream. You're either absolutely massive or you're quite small. So I think he will get more popular. I think he'll sell more records. I think he'll do better. But I think the industry's changed in such a way that it's very hard for someone as good as Hamish Hawk to
Mm.
actually get
Mm.
into the mainstream. But you know what I'm like. I'm always foreseeing things, and doesn't mean to say I'm right.
I mean, sometimes in these situations, it takes a support slot on a big scale tour to bring him to more prominence by introducing him to an audience that otherwise may not know of him. And does
Mm.
he strike you as the kind of person that would tolerate doing that?
I think he would. He's a thoroughly nice, charming chap. And when he was chatting
Mm,
to people afterwards, including me,
mm,
he handles everybody really well. He's a good bloke, really good bloke, or at least he seems to be. But
mm.
I can't imagine. Can you imagine him doing a support tour with Lewis Capaldi, for example, or Sam Smith, or
Well,
even Sam Fender, or anybody again
yeah.
with Sam? I'm not so sure. I think he ends up in
Sam
the
and
indie
Dave.
end. Yeah, you'll end up in the indie end of the market and supporting someone
Yeah.
bigger in the slightly indie world. But that means that his mainstream chances are limited by that fact alone.
I mean,
So I can't.
you've given examples there, Graham, of the most successful singers, stroke songwriters. In the case of Lewis Capaldi, in the case of Ed Sheeran, in the case of Sam Smith, gorgeous voice. Um, I wonder what it is that separates them having the hits and someone like Hamish Hawk, maybe that it would elude him.
Well, this is quite sad. It's always been the case that very intelligent music has usually sold fewer copies than really
Yes,
obvious emotional stuff that
yes.
ticks obvious boxes and presses
Mm,
emotional buttons and is easy to understand. That's always been the
mm,
case. But now that the reckoning has changed completely from 20, 30 years ago,
yeah,
that's more the case than ever. And I just think that if you're too intelligent now, you will not be mainstream. It's as
no.
simple as that.
Mm.
I think the only example that beats that is someone like Kendrick Lamar, the rapper.
Yeah, yes.
His lyrics are really intelligent. His
Mm,
albums are really intelligent, but the rap's a different thing altogether. Rap's built on words. You're allowed to be intelligent in rap and be big, but in pop music or rock music, too much intelligence is more of a problem than ever. I mean, look
I
at
mean,
the Arctic
you've
Monkeys,
tapped
the
into the
guitar.
key thing, I think,
Sorry,
Graham, there. I
mm,
think you mentioned the word emotion. And if you
mm.
look at big pop hits, Tom Grennan included, certainly Sam Smith, it is about, and he goes back to Robbie Williams singing, it's emotion in the songs that tends to be the biggest hits. And as opposed to intelligent comment on what the hell's going on, or I mean, another example of that is that Divine Comedy have not really had ever that many hits, despite the fact they, to me, have a commercial eye to the music that Neil Hannon does. But there is that sophistication, there is that elegance, and there is that intelligence. It doesn't seem to play commercially as well. So
Well,
ultimately, a more
when did
stripped
Divine
back
Comedy?
emotion.
Yeah, but when did Divine Comedy have most of their chart hits? In the 90s, when the
Yeah.
mainstream media and the mainstream record industry
Yes.
liked intelligent pop music, partly because Britpop was selling loads and loads of records. So it also depends what era you're in as to how you fare. It isn't just about how good you are. It's like whether you're lucky enough to be in the right time at the right place.
Tapping into emotion, Graham. I mean, the most obvious example of that would be Adele, would it not?
Oh yeah, good grief! I mean, I don't want to like Adele, but some of her music has such a strong melody and such strong emotions. It's very hard not to be affected by it. So there are some Adele tracks that I think are superb.
And that is why record
When
companies chase that with
when
other singers as well, it seems to me.
But what the Beatles did was like you'd have Let It Be, which is full
Mm.
of emotion, or
Mm.
Long the Winding Road, full of
Mm.
emotion. But there were emotion with intelligence. It is
Yeah.
possible, at least it used to be impossible. It used to be
Mm.
possible in pop
Mm.
to have big emotions with intelligence, but now they seem to be mutually exclusive.
Mm. Well, yes, I mean that's
But anyway, Hamish Hawk is definitely on the up, and he's no wimp. When you see the band, when you hear
no.
him, he may be intelligent, he may be a little fey and flamboyant, but he's not a will-o'-wisp wimpy character, and his music isn't wimpy either.
No.
It's quite strong, and it's got big melodies, and it's in the days of the Smiths, Hamish Hawk would have been pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, there again is a songwriter in Morrissey who could combine intelligence with emotion as well. Absolutely,
Exactly.
key to his lyrics, and wit, of course, and a turn of phrase that Oscar Wilde would have loved. So Hamish Hawk, just give me the name of the album again, Graham, just for everyone to look out for.
Angel Numbers.
Angel Numbers. Does he explain why it's called Angel Numbers?
Yeah. You got me there as well. Ask me a question I know the answer to.
Well, he's obviously in touch with angels and he's got their number. That seems to be the case on that one. So, Graham, thank you for that. Now, you've been busy watching Todd Haynes's film Chronicle of the Velvet Underground, which is on Apple Plus. Likewise, I've been watching the Andy Warhol diaries, and I can't even remember what channel that we're watching that on, Celestine and myself. We'll probably reflect more, I think, on Todd Haynes's piece, which is, tell me how this has come about then, this Velvet Underground one. If my memory serves me right, I think this came out last year, but have you sort of caught up with it more recently, presumably?
Yeah, it came out last year on Apple Plus. Well, actually, it came out technically 2021.
Yeah.
But the only reason I've watched it is because it's finally been released on Blu-ray, so that's why I managed to watch it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's probably on that American fantastic
Yes.
movie, old-fashioned physical company called Criterion, who
Yeah.
tend to like do restorations in 4K of classic European and American British films. And the Criterion's fantastic. So I bought Velvet Underground, which lasts 2 hours, by Todd Haynes, because Todd has a long track record of not only doing fantastic films like Carol starring Kate Blanchett,
Yeah.
or a long time ago Safe starring a young Julianne Moore, but he's also a real music fan. I mean, he made that film years ago about the Carpenters using in just dolls, and then he made Velvet Goldmine about the glam rock era in Britain,
And then he
which
had
got
I'm
great
Not There, the
reviews.
Bob Dylan one with everyone playing Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
including
So the
Kate
guy's a
Blanchett.
major
Yeah.
music fan. So you'd have thought there's no one better suited than Todd Haynes to do a documentary about Velvet Underground, the cult group of all time,
Mm.
one of the most influential bands of all
Yeah.
time, but still a bit obscure despite the fact they've been written about now for about 30, 40 years. And so I enjoyed it, and it's dazzling to look at, and the editing's absolutely superb. But there's something lacking in it that stops me totally endorsing it.
Does it feel too much like a hagiography, that it's not critical enough, that it's too much in awe?
No, it's more that he puts an awful lot of effort into creating the milieu of New York in the 1960s that produced the Velvet Underground.
Mm.
You know, the whole pop art scene, Andy Warhol's factory,
Yeah.
the experimental filmmakers, the bright young things in it taking drugs and hanging out with, you know, ne'er-do-wells and reprobates. That
Mm.
whole streetwise New York scene that eventually led in the 70s to punk. It's fantastic at creating that atmosphere in which the Velvet Underground came out of. But he spends so much effort in doing that very well that he sort of loses focus of the band a bit. And he's the only two original members alive now are John Cale and I think Mo Tucker, the drummer's still alive, isn't she? Is Mo Tucker still alive?
I think she
Fairly
is.
sure
I
she
think
is.
I think she is still
Yeah,
alive.
well,
Yes.
so he's got good current interviews with those two. So
Mm.
you understand John Cale very well after watching this documentary by
Yeah.
Todd Haynes. You don't understand Mo Tucker quite as well because she gets much less airtime, but at least they're
Yeah.
new interviews. But what he hasn't got is Lou Reed because he died.
She
What he
died.
hasn't got is
Yeah.
Stellan Morrison because he died. And
Mm.
so you not only don't get a total feel for those two as individuals, but when it comes to the story, he focuses on the music almost solely on the first album with Heroin and All
Yeah.
Tomorrow's Parties
Yeah.
and I'll Be Your Mirror and Waiting for the Man
Sunday
with
morning.
Nico on a few
Mm.
tracks. Yeah, Sunday Morning, a
Mm.
classic album. And he shows how that sound evolved in that New York milieu of the 1960s. But having done that, the rest is all like skated over. So, for example, the third album, the first one, came out in January '69 after
Yeah.
John Cale's booed out the band in September
Yes.
'68.
Mm.
The third album is dealt with in a really perfunctory fashion. But the third album is at least as good as the first album artistically, even
Yeah.
though it's not exactly the same in feel. And in fact, in terms of influencing British and American indie bands of the 80s, including REM, the third album probably had a bigger impact on all those bands like Orange Juice than the first album did, apart from Juice Chain, who loved the first album and loved the
Yes.
feedback on this album. But all the rest of the bands loved the third
Mm.
album. And if Jonathan Richman wasn't interviewed for this movie, because he saw them at the time lots of times and he was a big
Mm.
fan. He understands what makes the music good, what makes the music great. If it wasn't for that, the film loses sight of why they were a great band beyond the Andy Warhol era and the Nico era. It
Yeah.
just doesn't grasp hold of that. And on top of that, it doesn't get a great feel for Louis as a character until the very end when it finishes with a little bit of film footage which looks like it's from the 1970s, and it's real amateur footage. And it's clearly Andy Warhol and Lou Reed having a chat in an informal
Mm.
situation together, face to face. And that bit is so human. You suddenly see Lou Reed as a real person, not as a myth. And I thought the film could have done with a bit more about what Lou Reed was really like, as opposed to the mythology that he himself liked to spin.
I would have
So
thought.
it's
I mean, that is a difficult thing to do because of exactly the reasons that you say. He constantly spun mythology around him, and he's
mm.
not there to be interviewed now, as isn't Warhol himself, of course. So I think you've got a further problem there. But you are looking for a film director in that situation to come up with some of his own conclusions as well,
Mm, mm, mm.
to give new insights. And if it's not doing that, that I think is a failing, isn't it?
Yeah, again, it's a bit like Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. If you know
Yeah.
nothing about Velvet Underground, it's a great documentary. But if
Mm.
you know quite a lot about them already, it's got flaws, but it's still a great film. It's still well worth watching.
Does
I
it
mean,
talk
I'm not
about
gonna
the VU album at all? The sort of, to call it the
no.
comeback album would be misleading, but
Once you get past Loaded, the last Velvet Underground album
yeah,
with Louis in it, it skates through the whole history. Then you just get
yeah,
like a quick montage of like their solo albums, and then
mm,
you get a quick montage of them reforming for a European tour in
yes,
the early 1990s. And they never did an American tour because Cale and Louis couldn't couldn't work together after the
Couldn't work
European
together
tour,
from way back.
and 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 that's about it. So
Yeah.
it races through all that stuff completely.
I mean, if one looked at the strength of the Elvis film, I did think that caught the essence of what made him appealing out of nowhere. There'd been no one like him before.
Hmm.
Does this film, because that I think again is the essence of Velvet Underground's appeal. They were like nothing else before. Did that, and maybe that's why he's focused on that first album, how it all started with doing cool gigs for Andy Warhol. You can understand on one level why that would be the focus, and so maybe the essence of the film is does it absolutely capture what it was that made them stand out from everyone else at that time, why they were like no other band at that time.
Yeah, it does that. And it's also very good at showing how much of Lou's, ambiguous sexuality
Yes.
played into his songwriting and
Mm,
into the band. And it's very
mm,
good at showing you how gay culture in the 1960s pop art scene in
yeah.
New York street art scene as a whole, that all fed into
Mm,
all these revolutionary new forms of art and music. It's very good at showing that. And of course, Todd Haynes is very good at dealing with gay subjects anyway, because he was one of the
yes.
first successful American film directors to deal with
Yeah.
gay subjects without treating it like some sort of
Mm,
oddity.
mm,
So it's very good at that. But Velvet Underground were much more than that. And you can tell that because when you listen to the third album, it's different to the fourth and final album because of the guitar sound involving Stella Morrison and
yeah.
the drum sound involving Mo Tucker. And those are
Yeah.
the two key elements in creating the Velvet Underground sound. And Mo Tucker wasn't on the fourth album, Loaded, and it
No.
sounds different already. And it's a great album, but it
Mm,
doesn't sound like Velvet Underground.
no.
And the film gives the accidental picture that Velvet Underground meant John Cale and Andy
Mm,
Warhol
mm,
and all these ultra cultural morals at the time. And
yeah.
the band as musicians come play second fiddle to that.
Mm. It's, I mean, you mentioned about the gay side of things. Obviously, as I say, we've been watching Celestine and I making our way through the Andy Warhol diaries, which I think that documentary series, I think it's been beautifully made. It's obviously the source material is absolutely direct from his diaries, so it is entirely steered through. Well, I think it's a voice simulator. It refers to. It says resemble
Mm.
Al has actually sort of done the voices of Warhol, unless it's interviews or whatever. And it's a long history of obviously underground culture, but also of gay culture in New York and America, which ties in with what you're saying in the Velvet Underground one. And I mean, the figure of Warhol, you absolutely see it from his point of view. A man who craved glamour but wasn't glamorous himself, but absolutely had a sense of what that was. Surrounded himself with beautiful people. Was aware of his own artistic limitations, if you like, and how in the end he was even contemplating should he just go back and do more Campbell's soup tins, which it would have been the obvious thing to do, and that need for people saying, well, come on, where's the experimentation? But what comes across as well is his celebration of other artistic talent other than his own, Basquiat being a great example of that. But his constant looking for fresh talent and inspiration, and that included um, the graffiti artists of that time, as well as also his appreciation of music at that time and how that would change as well. And I mean, to call the parallels with Hockney, which is maybe a lazy comparison, but they both bleached their hair or whatever. But it would be fair to say that Hockney's ended up being more experimental in some ways and constantly looking to change his art. But in terms of
Yeah, but
actually,
Hockney's much more bourgeois than Warhol.
yes,
What
yes, he
Warhol
is.
wasn't a particularly bourgeois
No, he wasn't.
artist
No.
whatsoever, although he was
Mm,
into money, but that's a very American thing.
mm,
Uh, and Hockney totally fits into any traditional, despite his gayness, he's
yes.
as cozy as a pair of slippers as
And
Hockney.
most definitely Warhol is not cozy in any way.
Yeah,
And there was
yeah.
always that sense of him being the immigrant outsider as well. I don't think he ever quite loses that.
Well, that's what made him into rock. That's why he could do rock and roll. That's why he could
Yeah,
hang out with those people because he was an outsider
yeah.
and he was different. But
Mm,
I think he gets shortchanged in his personality because he
mm,
actually was very good at glamour. He
mm.
himself was good at looking glamorous when he wanted to. The
He-
only
the-
thing he was
yeah,
that he wasn't chatty.
no,
He was, he wasn't the sort of guy to like walk into a room and start yakking away.
no,
And also, he didn't really want to take charge because he believed in letting people do interesting things, and he knew that if you want them to be interesting, you have to let them do what they want.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
he got accused of like, having no moral compass and having no direction and leading
yeah,
to, dangerous anarchy. But if he'd taken charge, A, all these creative things would never happened.
yeah.
And B, then be seeing some sort of like Svengali ogre who is pulling all the strings, which of course he wasn't. He
Mm,
just set the scene and then let everybody else come up with their own dialogue.
yeah, absolutely. Now, Graham, Public Image Limited have failed to be chosen to
Yeah.
represent Ireland in Eurovision with the latest song from John Lydon, a song all about his wife, Nora, who has dementia. And I think it's one of the most beautiful songs he's ever written. And you wouldn't know that it was a John Lydon song when you hear it at first. You would barely recognize the voice singing it.
You
Um,
mean
and
Hawaii?
I think it's a rather gutless decision, actually, to not have him singing it for Ireland. I think it was
But
a,
wasn't it voted on by Irish voters?
yes, it was. And I think the reason, as I
There's your
understand it,
problem,
was
Charles.
well, he said very negative things in his time about Eurovision, how awful it
Mm.
was, and so it seems with that petty mindedness that people who worship Eurovision have, that's enough to rule out whether the song was strong enough or not. I think it would have been fascinating to have had him doing it, and I think it was rather an unexpected and bold move on his part to apply to do it. I think it's
Well,
one of the best songs he's ever written in a very different style from anything he's done before. It's
yeah.
truly emotional and moving about love, and it's a side of him that we don't usually see. We do not see. Anger as an energy is the kind of image we think of him. Here's something completely different from later in his life that absolutely captures adult love in a beautiful, beautiful way.
There is a slight problem. The sort of people who would have voted for the Irish entry to decide who it was going to be
Mm,
are the sort of people who are interested in Eurovision, who
yeah,
tend to be not people who've even heard of Public Image Limited. So to most of the people voting in Ireland, I would have thought they would think, who the hell is John Lydon? Who the hell is Public Image Limited? Which wouldn't have helped. And also,
no,
he's not the young face of future music, no matter how legendary he is. So I wasn't
mm.
surprised that he didn't win,
No, not
and I
nor am
wasn't
I.
I,
But
I wasn't.
I thought it was a bold move, and he had a
Well,
lot.
yeah, you could be
And he could have
cynical.
he could have lost face with it. He could have lost face with
Yeah,
doing
but
that.
you could be cynical and say that it was like his butter advert where he took the money for doing butter adverts. It was a sort of like great PR campaign for him
Was that
because
not one of your favorite
it's give.
adverts ever?
I wasn't that bothered either way. It was a bit of a
Mm,
hoo-ha because he was the man who wrote and sang Eric in the UK, but
yeah.
rather than butter in the UK. But butter. The thing
Butter off
is that,
Dad. That's the one.
this has been great for his PR because he has been in more news headlines than any point in the last 15, 20 years through
And he
this.
does have a
So you
new
could be
album. He does have a Public Image
yeah,
album on the way. So
exactly. So
yes,
you could be cynical. I think the only reason that I'm not cynical about what he's done with this is that he's got Irish roots, and his
yeah,
first autobiography was called "No Irish, No Blacks, No
yeah,
Dogs."
mm,
So it may have been that John Lydon entered this competition for completely honest reasons, and it
mm.
wasn't an act of cynicism whatsoever.
It's just that I guess with John Lydon, we do always expect there's something arch in what he's doing. Not as much as McLaren would play the Artful Dodger, and the reason he and Lydon fell out was probably they both had visions that would clash because they both wanted to be the original thinker at all times. So it does seem to be in keeping with that. As I say, that I think the most important thing about it is someone writing a song to someone who is struggling with dementia and writes a beautiful love song to them. And we know how powerful song is for those people suffering from dementia. A love of music or a recognition of music is the last thing that goes, as I know from my father's experience. And maybe I'm being, therefore, I take a different view from some people on this because I think I know what it means to John Lydon to write a song like this. I think it's not been written about in this way before, and I think the imagery of Hawaii is beautiful within it. I love the guitar within it. And yes, maybe it didn't. Maybe Eurovision was a step too far for it. But in his canon of work, I think it's one of the most original things he's ever done.
Yeah, I think you're right, Charles. But sadly, he didn't win.
No, he
So he's
didn't.
not going to be at Liverpool in
No,
May when they hold the Eurovision there. So
I know. So
end of story.
we're gonna miss out on them. That more's the shame. Talking of things Irish, Graham, and I'm not sure how many minutes we've got left. We've still got plenty. You just a possible interruption. So I'm interrupting on your behalf on this one.
Oh, great. That suits
So
me.
tell me, it's a quote from John Lennon, a John Lennon book, on the subject of the IRA. And this is my link with Ireland there,
Well,
which is rather cheesy,
yeah,
but
well,
we might as well go for it.
it's
Tell me
from my
what this
book of the
quote
year
is,
last
Graham.
year. It's from my
Hmm.
book of the year last year by Jon Stewart, Dylan, Lennon, Marx and God. And it's
Yes.
quite a pretentious book, but it's well worth reading. And I'll read you one little bit to show you how
Yeah.
pretentious it is. So here's a bit about Lennon in it. And it says, by Jon Stewart, after discovering Vedic philosophy, Lennon absorbed increasingly transliminal concepts over time, before arriving at a uniquely inward-looking esotericism. That's the sort of level of writing you've got. But it also has lots of interesting facts. So, for example, in the aftermath of Bloody Sunday,
Yes.
when British paratroopers murdered peaceful protesters in
Yeah.
Derry and Northern Ireland in January 1972,
Mm.
John Lennon, who was in his most left-wing phase at that point, he
Mm.
actually met a leading IRA member, Jerry O'Hare,
Oh yeah.
to suggest raising money for the IRA. I mean, Jerry O'Hare, although he was a journalist as well as an IRA member, was later
Yeah.
jailed by the British. And so, can you imagine a pop star today of John Lennon's worldwide fame and success meeting up with a terrorist organization to
No.
raise money for them?
No.
Exactly. That's how things have
Definitely.
changed.
Definitely not. So
No. But Paul
That Jon
McCartney was.
Stewart book, Graham, that's it does sound like a PhD treatise.
Well, yeah, I'll read you a little bit from the Jon Stewart book
Yeah.
published by Cambridge University Press. This is about Bob Dylan.
Mm.
More than a century later, Dylan's reverence for nature and his distaste for industrial progress reflected the irresolvable dichotomy between at the height of Fordist average book about pop stars, do you?
No, absolutely not. Now,
But Paul McCartney, and here's another interesting,
oh
Paul
yeah, go
McCartney himself was so moved by Bloody Sunday that the day
on. Mm.
after the terrible events in Derry,
Mm.
Paul McCartney wrote a day later, "Give Ireland back to the
Give
Irish."
Ireland back to the Irish.
He
Yeah.
then recorded it the next week, and it was up for release 1 month after the terrible events. Sir Joseph Lockwood, the chairman of EMI, phoned up Paul McCartney personally and said, "You cannot possibly put this record out."
No.
And Paul McCartney said, "Yes, I can. I'm Paul McCartney." And
Yeah.
then put the phone down. And out came "Give Ireland Back to the Irish"
Yeah.
at the height of the troubles
Mm.
in Northern Ireland. I think it got to about number 16 in Britain because it was banned
Was
by
it banned from
the
the radio?
BBC
Was it banned from the
completely. Yeah, the
BBC?
BBC completely
Mm.
banned it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, times have changed. John Lennon and Paul McCartney getting involved with that sort of thing
Mm.
in public, it just doesn't happen anymore.
No.
People who are that big are either not interested or they know it's dangerous and will affect their financial security, so they just don't bother.
And record companies are quite happy to, well, do put pressure on to which they would seem to give in. I mean, we've decried the lack of political songwriting in more recent times, which we sort of heightened again, obviously, with the death of Terry Hall, and we were thinking back to songs like Ghost Town and wondering where such songwriting went, and where was the next Billy Bragg, where was the next Elvis Costello singing political songs. And maybe it's just something that, I don't know, record companies
It's not.
maybe just do not see it as being something that's got any commercial potential, and it seems to always be about commercial potential, and not actually whether there's an important message that needs to be said. And these are times where you'd think, where the hell are the political songs?
Hey, but there's loads, Charles. You just have to look at the Idols or Sleaford Mods or even
Yeah,
Yard Act. But these aren't bands that are going to influence the
no, they're
majority
not.
of people. These
No,
these are bands that you and me have heard of,
yeah,
and their fans have heard of, and no one else has.
yes,
So
yeah.
that's what's changed. Public figures of huge renown and
Mm.
financial wealth used to get involved, and now they don't.
I mean, if we look back, we mentioned the Specials as strongly political songwriting. I mean, they were political from the very, very start. Before success, they were strongly political in their songwriting. The Smiths were strongly political in their songwriting, right from the start. And so that's and they did go on to huge commercial success. So that route can still happen. Obviously,
Yeah, but I
Elvis
think the
Elvis
biggest
Costello strongly political from right from the start.
yeah, I think the biggest problem is the lack of Top of the Pops. When Top of the
Yes.
Pops was watched by 70 million people every week, including grannies and
Mm,
3-year-olds and 20-year-olds and 50-year-olds and 45-year-olds,
mm,
if you were good and were marginally successful, you would get on Top of the Pops. And then when you're on Top of the Pops, if you looked interesting and your song was good, even if it was
yeah.
political, you had a
Mm,
mass audience going, "Oh, I quite like this. It's not usually my
mm,
sort of thing, but oh, I quite like it." So you
mm.
could cross over, you could take outsider ideas into the mainstream thanks to Top of the Pops. And that show was axed years ago, mainly because it was declining in popularity massively. But even so, it makes a big difference.
I mean, the BBC obviously were not going to have "God Save the Queen" on at the time that first came out. They did have "Pretty Vacant" on. "Pretty Vacant" was on Top of the Pops and had a huge impact on Top of the Pops.
Well, yeah, because the BBC has the charter that's supposed to represent everybody. So
Mm,
if you're a bit successful, the BBC felt obliged to give you some coverage,
mm.
which is a good attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Graham, last matter, because we're down into our last 3 minutes. Dry Cleaning, whose latest album, Stump Work, I have a copy in front of me, and your thought is why Dry Cleaning and their ilk will become the cult bands of the future. Dry
Yeah,
Cleaning, led by Florence
I've,
Shaw and Gary
I've tried.
Ashby, the single about a
Yeah,
family tortoise.
Garage is a great track. It's a
It
great
is.
track, and I like the sound. I like the sound of Dry Cleaning. But eventually, I've got to the same point with Stump Work as I got with Squid, Black
Yeah,
Midi, Black Country New Road, all these
yeah.
experimental, slightly post-punk bands
Mm,
who are a bit off on a tangent, a bit loose and a bit
yeah.
creative and a bit wild. And I like the sound of them, and they're probably brilliant live bands. But ultimately, they don't write many good songs. And if they don't write good songs, I just get bored with the albums. But then again, I remembered, wait a minute, back in the late 70s during post-punk era, first time round, you had
Mm,
Gang of Four, you had the pop group, the Delta
yeah.
5, the Raincoats. I remember those bands and John Peel. I used
Mm,
to think, oh, I do actually like that because interesting sound, but the songs aren't very good. So
mm,
I've come to the conclusion that the next generation's going to look back to Dry Cleaning and Squid and Black Midi with
mm.
reverence and think these bands were really important. And I'm going like, I'm not going to listen to these albums again. So it's
Well, I
come
can,
full
I can,
circle.
I can see that. I mean, Dry Cleaning. I, I think if I make the comparison with, do you know the singer Sarah Nixie?
No.
So she sang. Now then, well, I'm going to get the Luke. It was Luke Haynes's second band, not the
Oh,
O'Tours, but the
yeah,
band
yeah,
that
yeah.
followed that. And
Cool.
she sang in exactly that same style. That's what do they now call it? There's a German word for it. This speak singing, as it is,
Oh,
which of
yeah.
course Florence Shaw does, with that certain level of disdain that's in the voice. And
Irony, a bit of
I
irony.
yeah, and full of irony, and I think it only works in an English voice. Um, so I'm not so sure. I think you might be underplaying the quality of songwriting on Stump Work. It is
Well,
within a
I'd
streamed way.
argue
I
I'm
get
not.
that.
I'd argue that they're an interesting band, but interesting doesn't equal always great songwriting.
No, and so probably you're arguing. Well, not saying you're arguing. You do wonder where the third album would have to go. There would be a need for a veering away from where it's gone so far. Otherwise, Dry Cleaning, like Dry Cleaning, you'll have paid, you'll have left, and
Well,
that'll be it.
think
Washed up.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub production.